$14,200,000 has been transferred out of Novatract accounts, Soraya, and every authorization on this table carries your name. Calder Finch, 40-year-old co-founder and chief operating officer of Novatract Technologies and husband of Soraya, dropped a thick folder onto the center of the dining table without looking at his wife. Soraya Rowan Finch, 34-year-old director of the Rowan Learning Foundation and wife of Calder, stood at the far end of the table beneath a cold overhead light. Her usual chair had been moved. Blythe Harwood, 31-year-old head of business development at Novatract, and the woman Soraya had not yet named aloud, occupied it instead. The dinner had been called a family strategy meeting. The food was untouched. Inside the folder were vendor payment logs, a series of digital transfer confirmations, and a company registration document for a firm called Rowan Digital Literacy Partners. The name was close enough to Soraya's foundation to be intentional. The signature on the registration was close enough to hers to be dangerous. Vernon Finch, 67-year-old chairman of Novatract Technologies and father-in-law of Soraya, studied her from the head of the table. He did not look like a man who doubted his son. He looked like a man who had already decided. Helene Finch, 62-year-old socialite and mother-in-law of Soraya, set her wine glass down without a sound. "You spent years in our family acting as though you needed us," she said. "All this time, you were learning how everything was connected." Soraya looked at Calder. "You know I did not create that company." Calder looked past her toward the window. Drexler Canfield, 57-year-old Finch family attorney, placed a second folder beside the first. Inside it was a divorce petition already signed by Calder, an acknowledgement of service, and a proposed settlement requiring Soraya to transfer her interest in the marital property, accept a confidentiality clause covering Novatract's financial records, and sign a statement acknowledging unauthorized use of company vendor systems. Soraya picked up the settlement and read it page by page. Then she picked up the pen. She signed the acknowledgement, confirming that she had received the divorce petition. She signed the written consent, stating that the marriage should end. When Calder pushed the settlement statement toward her, the one that asked her to accept responsibility for $14.2 million she had never touched, Soraya placed it back down unsigned. "I agreed to end this marriage," she said. "I will not sign a confession for a theft you design." Calder's jaw tightened. He had expected her to hesitate. He had not expected her to be precise. Before he could respond, two of Novatract's security personnel approached and emptied Soraya's bag across the table. A small gray device, a portable data drive, fell out and clattered against the polished wood. Blythe spoke before anyone else could. "That's the drive. That's where she stored the extracted files." Soraya turned slowly toward her. "No one has opened it. How do you know what it holds?" One beat of silence passed. Blythe's confidence flickered and returned. "I recognize the company casing. We issued drives like that to the analytics team." Liesl Finch, 28-year-old communications manager at Novatract and Calder's younger sister, stared at the drive from across the table. She had seen a drive that looked exactly like it 2 weeks earlier. She had seen it in Blythe's hand. Liesl opened her mouth. Helene gripped her wrist beneath the table. "Not one word," Helene said quietly. "Not one." Liesl looked down at her plate. The dining room doors opened. Detective Kira Breslin, 43-year-old financial crimes investigator signed to the Novatract transfer case, entered with 2 officers and a warrant. She had received the evidence package 6 days earlier. Calder had submitted it himself. He had arranged this dinner after learning the arrest was already coming. As the officers approached, Soraya looked at Calder one final time. He was already reaching for Blythe's hand. Carrick Vane, 50-year-old financial attorney and longtime legal advisor to Soraya's family trust, entered behind the officers and identified himself as counsel. Soraya turned toward him. "Contact Ardmore," she said quietly. "Preservation hold on every Novatract account. Independent committee only. I am fully recused." Fen Galbraith, 44-year-old Novatract chief financial officer and Calder's closest ally inside the company, stood near the back wall. When Soraya said the name Ardmore, something shifted in his face. Calder did not notice. He still believed the woman being led out of his dining room was a foundation director with a modest trust and no real power. He had never read the sealed disclosure attached to their marriage agreement. He had signed it at the attorney's office while Helene complained about the caterer for their rehearsal dinner. He assumed the protected trust Soraya mentioned held real estate and a modest portfolio. What it held was 68% of Ardmore Capital, a private data and investment intelligence firm valued at $1.8 billion, which managed Novatract's banking relationships, credit lines, vendor payment infrastructure, and proprietary data licensing contracts. The woman Calder was framing owned the institution his company could not survive without. 3 weeks before the dinner, Novatract Technologies had suffered a data routing failure that froze contractor payroll for every offshore development team the company employed. 1,100 workers were due their wages by Friday. By Wednesday morning, the error had not been resolved, and the operations floor was loud with panic. Calder had called Soraya. He did not call her because he trusted her judgment. He called her because she had quietly rebuilt the same system 2 years earlier, and because every other option had already been tried. His message was short. The routing architecture you restructured last spring is failing again. If your foundation work can wait, come prove you're still useful when real numbers are on the line. Soraya had been sitting off stage at the Rowan Learning Foundation's annual scholarship ceremony. 40 students were waiting to receive awards named after her mother, Clara Rowan, who had died at 61 after spending her last years telling Soraya that she needed nothing more than her own name to walk through any room. Soraya asked her deputy to present every award. "Tell them I will meet each one of them personally," she said. Then she left, because 1,100 families were waiting on wages, and that was not an abstraction. She arrived at Novatract's operations center 20 minutes later. Fen had already blamed Ardmore's payment API for rejecting the emergency credit request. Vernon sat at the conference table with his jaw tight. Helene, who had no operational role, had come anyway and was suggesting that the real problem was too many offshore contractors. Calder handed Soraya a report across the table without greeting her. She read it quietly. Within 10 minutes she found the error, a routing authentication flag that had been manually overridden 3 months earlier by someone with senior credentials. The override allowed payments to flow through a secondary vendor pathway that had never been fully approved. 2 of the vendor IDs in that pathway were companies she did not recognize, one called Finch Strategic Consulting, one called Rowan Digital Literacy Partners. The second name made her stop. Fen noticed her pause. "Enterprise architecture is a little different from grant disbursement," he said. She raised her eyes. "Rerouting money through vendors you've described as partners doesn't make the obligation disappear. It just delays the day someone asks where it went." The room went quiet. A junior systems analyst checked Soraya's correction and nodded without speaking. Calder told everyone to leave. Vernon hesitated at the door. Helene muttered that Soraya had embarrassed her son in front of his own employees. Liesl lingered for one extra moment, watching Soraya with an expression that was somewhere between recognition and guilt before following the others out. Soraya rebuilt the routing structure from the clean backup she had documented 2 years earlier. While she worked, her mind kept returning to the vendor name, Rowan Digital Literacy Partners. It was close enough to the foundation that anyone reviewing the payment logs casually would assume the connection was legitimate. She found a private office, locked the door, and opened Ardmore Capital's secure compliance portal on her trust-issued device. Miette Cross, 56-year-old Chief Compliance Officer at Ardmore Capital, and one of the firm's most trusted senior officers since the time of Soraya's father, appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Rowan," Miette said, "the Novatract payment irregularities triggered a formal review flag this morning. 3 vendor registrations have been opened using document sets connected to your personal identity." Soraya asked which documents. Miette named them: Soraya's passport, her tax identification number, a signature lifted from a 7-year-old grant agreement, and her mother's death certificate. "Whoever created these companies wanted your name attached to the money before anyone looked closely," Miette said. "We believe they were designed to create a financial trail leading directly towards you." Soraya looked through the glass wall at the operations floor, where 1,100 families were still waiting. "I want the contractors paid," she said. Miette explained that Ardmore's independent credit committee could authorize an emergency draw if Novatract submitted corrected routing documentation, separated payroll flows from the vendor accounts in question, and accepted an independent audit of the flagged companies. "I will not participate in that decision," Soraya said. "Do not protect Novatract because Calder is my husband, and do not restrict them because he has insulted me. Apply the standard you would apply to any other client." She returned the correct report to Calder without explanation. Novatract submitted the required documentation. Ardmore's committee approved the emergency draw. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, every contractor received confirmation that their wages had been released. Calder walked out to the operations floor and told his team that his negotiations with Ardmore had resolved the crisis. Soraya stood behind the conference room glass and watched him accept handshakes. Liesl stood nearby. She knew whose work had actually protected those paychecks. She also knew she would not say so. It was Carrick who told Soraya what was coming. He placed 5 access records across the table inside the secure archive room beneath the Rowan Learning Foundation's main office. Someone had pulled copies of her passport, her tax identification, her historical grant signatures, old trust filings, and Clara Rowan's death certificate, all through Novatract's estate planning office, all within the past 4 months. 4 months earlier, Calder had borrowed Soraya's passport. He said the family attorney needed it to update their joint property documentation. She had not asked for it back. Carrick spread the records carefully. These were not pulled for any estate update. Someone collected enough of your personal history to become you on paper. Soraya's stomach turned. She looked at the sealed letter she had prepared for Calder. Their 9th anniversary was 3 weeks away. She had planned to tell him everything then. Her full name, Ardmore, her father's history, the life she had moved quietly behind for years, and let him hear it from her, honestly, face to face. Carrick also told her that the final succession restriction on the Rowan Continuity Trust had expired that morning. She could publicly claim her controlling ownership of Ardmore Capital whenever she chose. I still want him to know it from me, Soraya said. Carrick did not argue. He simply watched her face. On the wall hung a photograph of Ashby Rowan, standing outside Ardmore's original offices with one hand resting on 10-year-old Soraya's shoulder. He had built the firm from a single data licensing contract into one of the most quietly influential investment intelligence companies in the country. After a financial magazine identified Soraya as his only heir when she was 12, 2 men had tried to force her into a car outside her school. Her mother Clara had put herself between them and her daughter. Clara had been hurt before they fled. After that, Ashby removed Soraya's name from every public record connected to Ardmore. She began using Clara's surname at school. The trust was buried in sealed filings known only to a small circle of trustees, Ardmore's senior officers and the relevant regulators. Soraya had learned to live without displaying what she owned. By the time she met Calder, living simply felt like more than security. It felt like freedom. They had met at a financial literacy workshop she was hosting for first-generation college students. He had stayed after to help fold chairs and talked with her for 2 hours about nothing that mattered yet. When she mentioned that her father had left her a protected trust, Calder had smiled. I care about what you build, not what someone handed you, he said. She had believed him. In their early years together, he defended her when Helene mocked her clothes. He credited her analysis when he used it in presentations. He called her work important. Then gradually, over years, the gratitude became assumption. Her ideas became his presentations. Her foundation became his tax strategy. Her silence about Ardmore became a gap he filled with the belief that she simply had less. After Blythe joined Novatract, Calder's phone became private. His schedule became vague. Every question Soraya asked became an accusation. She had delayed telling him about Ardmore each time something else demanded her attention. Now, standing in the records room, she understood that she had been waiting for a version of Calder that no longer existed. 16 days after the payroll crisis, Soraya attended Novatract's annual technology showcase with the sealed anniversary letter inside her bag. Blythe arrived before Soraya. She straightened Calder's collar, spoke to venue staff using his preferred tone, and accepted compliments on the event as though she had organized it herself. She wore a bracelet Soraya had seen charged to Calder's account 2 months earlier. Helene leaned towards Soraya near the entrance. Blythe understands what a man building something real actually needs, she said loudly enough for the people nearby. She doesn't spend her evenings teaching strangers how to fill out forms. Calder glanced at Soraya. Don't. She had not spoken. Later, Liesl found her near a service exit. Soraya, she said quietly, did you register a vendor company using your foundation's name? No. Fear entered Liesl's face. Before she could continue, Blythe appeared behind them. Internal vendor records aren't appropriate conversation for outside the office, Blythe said pleasantly. I'm Calder's wife, Soraya said. You're his spouse. That's not the same credential. Liesl walked away without looking back. Soraya retrieved her bag from the event cloakroom and returned to find the sealed letter. She wanted to leave it on Calder's desk. One last honest attempt. The office door was open. Voices came from inside. She stepped closer. Calder had Blythe pressed against the edge of his desk. Soraya's pain arrived quickly, but one sentence held her in place. Once the charges land, Blythe said, Ardmore will classify it as an isolated internal theft. The credit line stays open. Calder pulled her closer. The family thinks she married into this world on luck. They'll accept whatever narrative we hand them. Soraya stood in the corridor and understood. The vendor companies, her stolen documents, the family dinner Helene was organizing, the letter she was holding, none of it was separate. The affair and the missing money and the plan to remove her had been designed as one thing. She photographed the desk through the gap in the door, passport copies, her old foundation signature cards, a grey data drive sitting on a folder labeled Rowan Archive, a draft press release, with the words internal fraud discovered already typed into the headline. Calder saw her reflection in the glass partition. He stepped back from Blythe, but did not look ashamed. Our marriage was over long before you walked down that hallway, he said. Blythe moved beside him. Wearing his name in public was never the same as belonging here. Soraya reached toward the folder on the desk. Calder closed it. You have no standing in this office, he said. She almost told him everything. She stopped herself. If Calder knew she controlled Ardmore, he would find a way to destroy records before the compliance hold could preserve them. She left without giving him the truth he had not earned. Carrick told her that evening to photograph every message, change the Foundation's security credentials, document every missing identity record, and send everything through protected channels. They may be preparing more than a divorce, he said. Do not face the Finch family alone. Soraya returned to the house only to collect essential belongings. While she was gathering the last of them, Blythe arrived with an overnight bag and her own key to the front door. She walked directly to Calder's home office without asking where it was. Then Soraya saw her mother's ring on Blythe's hand, Clara's ring, the one Soraya had left inside a closed box in the bedroom dresser. Take that off. Blythe looked at the ring. Calder gave it to me. He said it wasn't being used. Soraya removed it from her hand. Blythe let her, with a small smile that suggested she had already replaced everything of greater value. Calder appeared in the doorway. Come to the dinner Helene is hosting, he said. Cooperate, and this stays quiet. Soraya walked outside. Before she reached Carrick's car, her secure phone vibrated. A message from Miette. The grey data drive in the Novatrack vendor file was purchased through a company security order. Do not touch any device the Finch family presents to you. Soraya looked back at the lit windows of her house. Blythe was moving through the rooms like someone who had already moved in. The dinner was not a family gathering. It was a courtroom where everyone except Soraya already knew the verdict. She attended because Liesel had sent a warning. They're planning to destroy vendor records after the meeting. Whatever they're building against you, they need you there to finish it. Carrick waited outside. He told her to call the moment anything changed. Before entering the Finch home, Soraya photographed everything inside her bag and sent the timestamp to Carrick. She wore her father's watch. She carried no drives, no documents, no laptop. Helene made the cloakroom deposit a condition of entry. Soraya photographed her bag a second time before handing it over. Vernon presided at the head of the table. Holland Verd, 60-year-old Novatrack board member and longtime ally of Vernon, and Celine Bast, 55-year-old company director loyal to the Finch family, had been invited to give the evening the weight of official proceedings. Calder presented the vendor records, her name on the registration, her passport details on the identity page, emails describing her as desperate for foundation funding. The documentation looked thorough, but one email had been created after the date it claimed to have been sent. A payment sequence used an Ardmore identifier format the firm had retired 2 years earlier. Her signature on the registration carried the same tiny ink interruption as a 7-year-old grant form. It had been copied, not signed. Calder leaned back. You always complained about the foundation being underfunded. I turned down Novatrack money 3 years ago, Soraya said, because accepting it would have given you influence over the programs. Calder began rewriting their marriage history in front of his family. Every financial question Soraya had ever raised became evidence of premeditation. Every time she had understood a banking structure better than he expected became proof that she had been studying the system to exploit it. Helene looked at her with contempt. You came into this family performing humility while you were memorizing every number that mattered. Blythe smiled. Quiet women usually are hiding something. Soraya looked at Calder. Does everyone at this table also know you've been with her? No one spoke. Calder did not deny it. Blythe understands what I'm building, he said. She lives in that reality. You never did. Blythe placed her hand beside his. After this marriage ends, Calder and I intend to build something together. Drexler placed the settlement in front of Soraya a second time. She looked at Calder. She signed the acknowledgement. She signed the consent to dissolution. She returned the settlement unsigned. I agreed that this marriage is over, she said. I did not agree that I stole from you. Calder stood. Her refusal proves she's protecting something. It proves you put a confession inside divorce papers and counted on humiliation to make me careless. Novatract security brought her bag to the table. Helene emptied it herself, keys, foundation badge, a sealed travel packet, and then a grey data drive, identical in casing to the ones Soraya had seen in Blythe's hand, tumbling across the polished wood. Blythe spoke immediately. That's the file drive. That's where she pulled the vendor records. Soraya turned toward her. No one has opened it. How do you know what's on it? Blythe recovered quickly. I recognize the casing. We issued them to senior staff. Lizzle stared at the drive. Her hands were flat on the table. She had seen that exact drive in Blythe's bag at the operations meeting 2 weeks ago. She remembered the casing, the small Novatract seal along one edge. Helene's hand found Liesel's wrist beneath the tablecloth. One sentence destroys this family, Helene said. Liesel looked at her plate. Detective Breslin entered. She had been issued the warrant 6 days ago, based on the package Calder submitted. The dinner had been arranged after Calder already knew the arrest was scheduled. He had invited Soraya to sign the divorce papers while the warrant was already in place. News photographers appeared beyond the garden windows. Calder had arranged them before the officers arrived. Carrick entered behind the detective, identified himself, and stood beside Soraya. Preserve the drive's chain of custody, Soraya said to him steadily. Serial number, purchase record, fingerprints, preserve the cloakroom footage, the authorization logs, and every original file in the warrant package. She could have revealed Ardmore in that room. She chose not to. Ownership would not prove innocence, and if Calder understood the stakes before the records were preserved, he would find a way to destroy them first. She looked at Carrick. Notify Miette and hold on all Novatract accounts, all access logs. Independent review only. I am fully recused. Fenn's expression changed when he heard Miette's name. Calder still smiled. He believed Soraya was bluffing. The officers placed the restraints around her wrists. She looked at Calder one last time. He took Blythe's hand. That gesture ended everything Soraya had still been holding on to. The cell was quiet. A television in the hallway replayed footage of her being guided to the police vehicle outside the Finch property. The report described her as a non-profit administrator who had exploited access to her husband's company. It did not mention that the second transfer, $6.4 million initiated 30 minutes after Soraya sat down at the family dinner, had been approved while she was surrounded by 11 witnesses. It did not mention that no independent forensic review had been conducted. It did not mention that she had cooperated from the moment officers arrived. Calder's public statement appeared at the bottom of the screen. Novatract co-founder discovers internal breach, moves to protect company assets and investors. Soraya closed her eyes. She thought about what her father had told her once, watching a news channel. Run the name of an accused employee across the bottom of the screen before a single piece of evidence had been examined. An accusation becomes dangerous. Ashby had said, when powerful people repeat it faster than the truth can be checked. She had thought he was teaching her about banking. He had been teaching her about something larger than that. Her tears came quietly. Not because she feared losing a house or a title. She was mourning the man she had trusted with her passport, her grief, and the parts of her life she had kept from everyone else. He had used all three against her. In the morning, Miette's forensic team had already begun reconstructing the payment trail. Every transfer had left a real record. Calder's physical authorization token, required for the second large transfer, had been used from inside Novatract's executive floor at the exact time Soraya was seated at the Finch dinner table. Blythe's administrative credentials had altered the beneficiary details. Fenn had manipulated the internal reports. The drive found in Soraya's bag had been purchased through a company security order that Blythe had signed. Liesel had been awake all night. She sent Carrick a message through an anonymous account. Blythe entered the cloakroom before the bag was searched. I saw her. The public statement was written 3 days before the dinner. Calder knew the warrant was coming before Soraya arrived. Carrick preserved the metadata and forwarded everything to Detective Breslin through the proper evidence channel. By the time Calder arrived at Novatract the following morning, expecting his accounts to function normally, The screen showed a message he had never expected to see. Executive authorization suspended. Account under independent fraud review. Disputed funds subject to court restraint. Credit facility in material default review. Contact independent corporate counsel. He tried every account. All of them returned the same message. His authorization token had not expired. Ardmoore's independent committee had simply removed his access. He called Ardmoore directly. A risk officer named Silas Crew explained the situation without emotion. "I am Novatrak's chief operating officer," Calder said. "My family has banked with Ardmoore for over a decade." "That history does not change the present risk," Silas replied. Calder lowered his voice, aware of the employees standing outside his open office door. "Restore my access before I move every Novatrak account to another institution. You currently lack the authority to initiate that transfer." Calder looked at the token in his hand. For years, it had opened every major financial door inside his company. That morning, it was a small piece of metal attached to the name of a man the institution no longer recognized. His fingers began to shake. Vernon arrived and looked at his son across a room full of people whose wages Calder had endangered. "Again, what did you do?" he said. Calder said Soraya must have pressured the bank after her release. He said she was retaliating. Vernon read the governance notice Ardmoore had sent to Novatrak's board. He saw the name of the controlling beneficiary who had requested the independent review and then formally recused herself from every operational decision involving Novatrak. "Who authorized this review?" Vernon asked. Fenn kept his eyes on the floor. "The controlling beneficiary. She removed herself from all decisions before it began." "What's his name?" Fenn gathered his files. "You'll meet her tomorrow." The word "her" remained in the room after he left. Soraya entered Ardmore Capital's main boardroom the following morning, wearing her father's watch and a simple ivory suit. She did not smile at the Finch family. She did not look at Blythe. Aldrich Wren, 72-year-old chairman of Ardmore Capital and one of Ashby Rowan's oldest professional partners, rose when she entered. The independent directors rose behind him. "Soraya Rowan," Aldrich said, "controlling beneficiary of the Rowan Continuity Trust and principal owner of Ardmore Capital." The room was completely silent. Helene gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "This is theater. She orchestrated this." Vernon did not laugh. He knew the name Rowan. He had attended a conference where Ashby Rowan declined a profitable partnership because the terms would have compromised his employees' data rights. Vernon looked at Soraya and finally understood what he had been looking at for 9 years. "You're Ashby Rowan's daughter," he said. "Yes." Calder's face lost its color slowly. Memories returned faster than he could process them. The sealed trust disclosure. Soraya's knowledge of Ardmore's credit protocols. Her private calls with Mayetta during the payroll crisis. The way she had rebuilt the routing system in 40 minutes from memory. The name she had said as the officers restrained her. "Ardmore, independent review only. I am fully recused." Every clue had been there. He had dismissed all of them, because accepting her competence would have required him to question his own. "You lied to me," he said. Soraya sat down across from him. "I told you before our marriage that I owned a protected family trust. You never asked what it held. The documents were sealed because of my security history. You signed the agreement without reading the disclosure. You let me believe you had nothing." The old pain moved beneath her calm expression. She had spent her life learning not to display her inheritance because displaying it once, when she was 12, had put her mother in danger. "I wanted to be known as Soraya," she said, "not pursued as Ashby Rowan's heir." She explained that the final succession restriction had ended a month before the payroll crisis. She had written a letter for their anniversary. She had carried it to his office on the night of the technology showcase. "I found you with Blythe," she said. "I saw the documents building a crime around my name. I left without giving you the truth you had not earned. You still deceived me." She did not avoid the weight of it. "My secrecy created a distance between us that I should have closed sooner. I accept that." Then her voice steadied. "But I concealed an inheritance. You manufactured a crime and used the state to imprison an innocent person. Those are not the same betrayal." Calder had no answer. Mayette activated the transaction display. The authentic evidence appeared on the screen, Calder's token authorizing the second transfer while Soraya was surrounded by witnesses. Blythe's credentials altering the beneficiary records, Fenn's manipulated reports. The drive's purchase record linking it to a company security order Blythe had signed. Liesel's documentation proving the press statement had been drafted 3 days before the dinner. The forensic timeline showing that the shell companies had been built entirely using Soraya's stolen identity documents. Then Miette showed where the money had actually gone. Part of it covered Calder's unauthorized personal acquisition. Another portion funded an apartment lease and private accounts Calder had intended to share with Blythe. Blythe looked at Calder. "You told me no record could ever trace back to us." Calder ignored her. He turned towards Soraya. "You did this because of the divorce." Soraya placed her signed recusal document on the table. "I removed myself from every operational decision involving Novatrack before the review began. The independent committee made these decisions. Outside counsel obtained court authority for the account restrictions." She looked toward Vernon. "I also asked Ardmore to protect employee payroll and essential contractor accounts. Your workers should not lose their livelihoods because your son committed fraud." Vernon looked at the table. Novatrack still had a chance to survive because Soraya had refused to use the bank as a personal weapon. The boardroom doors opened. Detective Breslin entered with Stavros Rel, 47-year-old financial crimes prosecutor assigned to the Novatrack case, carrying search warrants, evidence orders, and device seizure notices. Calder looked at Soraya. The arrogance had finally left his face. "You could stop this," he said. "I could have used what I own to punish you personally," Soraya said. "I chose not to. That is why you are standing in front of evidence instead of in front of my anger." The officers moved toward Fenn's laptop. A second order was served on Blythe covering her devices and records. The warrant for Calder's office, phone, and company equipment was placed on the table in front of him. His hands trembled against the wood. He had believed the woman he had removed from his dinner table had no power left. He had taken away her chair. He had placed her under a bright light. He had arranged for cameras to wait outside while officers put restraints on her wrists. And the entire time, every number that moved through his company, every authorization token in his hand, every credit line that kept Novatrack alive, all of it had flowed through an institution that answered ultimately to her. The charges came several weeks later. Calder entered a guilty plea to multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and identity misuse. Blythe cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for reduced exposure and still lost her career and every asset tied to stolen funds. Fenn lost his professional certification and faced criminal penalties for manipulation and false statements. Helene came to Carrick's office seeking Soraya before the final proceedings. Her voice was unsteady. "If I had known who you were," she began, "I would never have spoken to you the way I did." Soraya looked at her without warmth or cruelty. "The woman you humiliated deserved basic decency before you knew what she owned." Helene lowered her eyes. Even her apology measured Soraya's dignity through wealth. Some things did not change easily. Lizelle came without her mother. She sat across from Soraya in a small office and did not try to explain herself. "I watched them put the restraints on you," she said. "I knew what was in that drive. I knew about the press statement, and I chose my family over the truth." Soraya waited. "I should have spoken before they took you out of that room," Lizelle said. "I can't change that I didn't." "No," Soraya said. "You can't." She let the silence hold for a moment. "But you told the truth when it still mattered to the investigation. That counts for something." It did not restore trust. Lizelle understood that without being told. What it opened slowly and honestly was the possibility of something that might one day be rebuilt on different ground. The final divorce order arrived on a Thursday morning. Soraya signed the receipt confirming she had received it. The same signature Calder had stolen and weaponized against her now marked the end of his claim on her future. She did not celebrate. She did not cry. She set the document beside her father's watch and looked out the window at Ardmore's operations floor, where analysts were preparing the morning's payment release confirmations. 1,100 contractors, every one of them paid. Every account preserved through the investigation, not because it was convenient for her, but because it was right. Ardmore employees rose when she entered the main lobby that morning. Some had known her since childhood. Others had known only the woman the news had called a thief for 3 weeks. This institution remained trustworthy through everything that happened, Soraya told them, because independent people followed evidence even when the owner was involved. That standard applies to everyone here, including me. She accepted a non-executive governance role focused on financial literacy access, fraud prevention, and employee protection programs. She did not place herself above the firm's existing structure. Independent directors retained their authority. Compliance teams continued operating without interference from her. Every major decision required the same review it would have required the day before her identity became public. Her ownership gave her responsibility. It did not make every decision hers alone. She placed her father's photograph beside his watch, in the office she had chosen at the end of the hall. Not the largest room, not the one with the best view. Just the one that looked out over the operations floor, where the numbers on the screen each belonged to someone's life. Back at the Rowan Learning Foundation, the scholarship ceremony she had left 3 weeks earlier was rescheduled. 40 students received their awards. Soraya was there for every name. At the end of the ceremony, she signed the foundation's new charter for the Rowan Clara Financial Justice Initiative, a program to support people wrongfully accused through financial document fraud, help identity theft victims recover their records, and provide legal resources to workers harmed by corporate misconduct. The same signature Calder had copied and weaponized now created something that would protect the next person he would never have bothered to consider. The applause that followed was quiet, the kind that means something. Soraya looked out at the faces of people who had believed her before they knew what she owned. She had no interest in being celebrated for the firm or the trust or the number attached to her father's name. She wanted to be known for what she had done when she had every reason to do nothing, and chose instead to make sure the truth had enough time to collect its witnesses. On her desk the next morning, a new file waited beside Carrick's handwriting. Urgent. Employee at a regional logistics company. Payroll account compromised. Identity used to authorize transfers she never made. She has no one who knows how to find the truth inside the numbers. Soraya opened the file. Her hiding was over, her marriage was over. But the work, it turned out, was only beginning.